Very cool. Very cool. Okay.
Awesome.
Awesome. So I think we'll probably just wait like a few minutes for people to roll in. Hello, we're at Chromatic. And yeah, that's like, let's give it 2 minutes. But what we want to go over today is just about Chromatic, about you, and then we can dive kind of into a bunch of recipe development. I think this is something that we haven't really shown too much, at least on our social channels. So I think it'd be cool to showcase some of that and what we can do on the app and everything like that.
Yeah. We played around with it a little bit, so should be good. Should we taste the coffee that we just brewed?
Yes. So what coffee is this?
All right, so this is a coffee that has not come out yet, and it's in its final stages of development. So we got Trevor brewing up a bunch. But it is a Pacamara, wet process Pacamara from Gloria Rodriguez in El Salvador, Apaneca, Ilamatepec region. Like I was mentioning earlier, I think it's like this, not rubber Pacamara, but Pacamara being Salvadoran cultivar, I think is exemplary. This roast, we approach a little bit differently, and we have to like work out some kinks just in the end of development. But we try to focus more on bringing out the fruit character in a Pacamara. I find that if you roast it, or the way that we roast it, if we approach it in a more traditional manner, the roast takes a little bit too long, and it starts developing some of the more like leathery, tobacco-y characteristics that I can pick up from Salvadoran Pacamaras. The main takeaway is always like mouthfeel is really nice.
A lot of great texture in here.
Really good texture. And there is some fruit, like stone fruit, plum, kind of figgy. I like the fig. Fig has been something like, we've been buying this coffee for years. So we're very familiar with a lot of these profiles. So we did roast it a little differently last year. I wanted to approach it with this more aggressive profile, just to, again, hone in and focus on the fruit, and try to shorten the roast so like the development ratio is a much larger portion just for that big bean, but it's still lighter and shorter overall.
Okay, cool. Let's see.
Right.
Now let's see how. Let me see how many people are here real quick. Awesome. Okay, so now that we have people rolling in, what we should do is let's talk a bit about Chromatic.
Cool.
Who you guys are and what's the background? How did all of this start? And then we can dive into some recipe development stuff, showcase some things on the app, as well as talk about like Gamut and some of these upcoming coffees that we're trying to feature soon. So that I think is the schedule today. And also feel free to leave any comments. We have the screen facing the other way, so we'll go around and check to see if there are any questions so far. But all right, well,
cool. Yeah. So Chromatic Coffee Company we started it in 2012, the early side of 2012, and then we didn't open our doors until October 13th, 2012. So it's been over 10 years that I've been doing this, and a great majority of my coffee career has been in this. I've been doing it for 17 years, so 10 of those years have just been purely Chromatic and running a coffee buying program and like being a roaster. I don't do as much roasting anymore, which is nice after 10 years of doing it every day, all the time. I learned a lot, and I still enjoy roasting, but it is a very demanding task. But other than that, I think, people always ask like, oh, why did you start Chromatic? Part of it was out of need. We were unhappy with our current situation. But the bigger picture of what was exciting was just being able to run a coffee program that I wanted. And as we kind of came into the understanding of our own name more, I was just doing like really awesome wash coffees. I did have some experimentals from the get-go, but like some of the principles of cup of excellence of terroir and honoring that. That was a big push for like how we bought our coffees. But then the what if, the experimental, like we always had that in our back pocket, and we were always kind of waiting for the market to kind of take onto it. So it's just offering a huge range of coffee flavors for those who are a little bit more experimental and want to find out. And we do have good solid offerings that you can get. If that's what you want, that's what you can get. And then the what if. And that is like the really exciting stuff, and I think the stuff that attracts a lot of coffee enthusiasts and that trying to understand the story. Like we do a lot of stories, so like this is the story of how this came to be.
Okay, let me just double check to see if people have any questions so far. Cool. Well, so for xBloom here, what we're doing is we're starting off by offering Keynote, which is just
bread and butter.
Yeah,
very that's the good stuff.
Very approachable coffee, and then there's a lot more to offer from Chromatic, and that's the stuff that we're really excited to eventually roll out. But for the start, Keynote, and what we've been doing here is we've been doing a lot of recipe development. So this is the type of work that we do with our roasters, is we get a machine and we basically set them up on our app and everything, and we kind of just dial in coffees. So there's a lot of flexibility for roasters and for you guys to use the machine. You can use it, you can have everything done for you, which is the work that we do here. Here's this recipe, the coffee brewing parameters are all taken care of, or you can go full on coffee nerd, and we really embrace that. We're really letting people do a ton of different brewing, like experiments with brewing, essentially.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's exciting for us, right? Because we make these little brew cards for each coffee release, and we go through a bunch of different brewing for each coffee before we even drop the coffee. So you can't see it in camera, but we have a bunch of brew equipment here. So a lot of manual brew methods. We run it through espresso, but a big challenge in the 10 years has been communicating. Somebody gets a bag of coffee, they try it out, it doesn't work out. They're like, hey, is there anything you could suggest? Like I went online, this and the other. But ultimately, we may have the best familiarity with it because we'll taste coffees dozens and dozens of times before it even drops, from multiple different cuppings of every batch roasted to the actual, hey, does this work as an immersion? Does it work as a filter? Does it work as that? So what we get to give you is an optimized recipe that we have done on this exact same machine that you get to replicate. So that's really awesome. And from the testing that we did a few weeks ago on Keynote, we're able to find what we think is that recipe that most people will enjoy because it's very smooth, approachable, chocolatey, a little nutty, really nice linger, aftertaste, excellent texture, good mouthfeel, creamy, and then then we kept on brewing. We pushed it a little further. We got more extraction and we got more floral elements and more fruit elements, and it was a little bit more intense. So we're like, we could make these two recipes and offer them to the same person or different people based on your preferences. So just even with our bread and butter mainstay, really excellent Keynote being pretty much always a Brazilian coffee, usually a natural or a mix between a pulp natural and a natural, depending on the flavor profile of that year. We'll go adjusting and working with the producers to get the volumes that we need. And we're bringing in a container of that a year. So that's 42,000 pounds. So we got lots of it. We always have it. It's fun.
Yeah, but for us here, what we can kind of show off is some of the back end work here is we have some of these. Let me see if this will show.
Should I do more Pacamara?
We can do more Pacamara, or we can do these Elefantes if you want. These ones we're probably going to be dropping soon.
Do you want to do the washed or the natural?
Let's start with the wash. We can do both. And
I usually say wet process, dry process, but I've been
dry.
feeling... You said natural, right?
Natural. Yeah, let's try natural. So for us here, what we can do is we've basically just been building out a variety of recipes here. So there are just multiple steps that you can do in the app here, and you can set different grind sizes, ratios, temperatures, so you can actually you can temperature profile throughout your entire pour. You can adjust the water volume, how much you add for each pour, and then you can also change the pattern, pausing times, vibration, and all of that. We are working on some other additional features that we want to add, but basically there are all of these recipes that are just embedded into these pods, and you have the flexibility of just rolling with it, or you can adjust it yourself. So that's kind of the way, the stuff that we've been doing, the work we've been doing with these roasters. But cool.
This is good to go?
Yes.
You already tagged it?
Yep. Now pour the coffee in, and then for the app we just start it on the phone, and the machine brews and you can tap. Let me see if there are any questions. Someone asked you, what's your favorite Chromatic coffee? What's like the favorite coffee? I guess it rotates all the time.
Oh, I used to say it's like my favorite coffee is one I haven't had yet. So I think last year we put out like 100 unique lots, which is a lot, and we cut through even more, of course. That is so hard. I really, from our mainstays, one of the reasons why I made it a mainstay being that we have it available year round. I pretty much figured out how to get multiple shipments within a year, so the product is always fresh. If there are multiple harvests, I am getting to pretty much like 2 shipments from either harvest. But from the one coffee, I think Kunjin, Papua New Guinea, it's a wet process coffee. Wagi Valley, it's really excellent. It is a little more savory of a coffee, and it's a little weird in that sense, but I've had this coffee since 2014 or something like that, and every time I have it, it's just such a slam dunk. I think it's a little squashy, like a cooked sweet squash, like a delicata almost. It also has like a lot of caramelly, like kettle corn characteristics. It has some herbaceousness, mainly like lemon verbena, so it's like a citrusy kind of punch. But the sweetness is phenomenal. The body is phenomenal. I know the descriptors I used may not sound super tempting, because I'm thinking more like back end, but it is floral. It is fruited. I think most people wouldn't attribute it to the descriptors I use, but it's just such a satisfying, rewarding coffee. So that's like a solid go-to. And then I also like some of the anaerobics are really excellent. The ones that are not overly fermenty or have evidence of like fermented. Like I like it when there's like a balance with terroir, and it's not obfuscating or like hiding any of the characteristics, just like elevating them. So I think maybe from last year, the Aricha anaerobic from Ethiopia, that was a stellar coffee, because I had the natural and the anaerobic just like pumped up all of the fruit flavors, and it didn't add that layer of booziness on top, which is what I tend to want to avoid, unless I have some wild, crazy conceptual idea to make a blend to taste like something else, like a barrel aging or whatever it may be. So like I like conceptually blending and executing on that, mainly to hit the mark. Is like, can we achieve this concept? As people are like, oh, is it good? Is it like we're not thinking in those terms. We just want to like see if we can make it taste like this other thing, or at least get the vibe. Any more questions?
So the other question is just how many coffees are available on xBloom. So at the very beginning, we're doing one, but we want to kind of open the doors to bringing a lot of the coffees that Iver has been talking about onto here. And I think that's what's really exciting for us. But what we're actually brewing right now is we're going to be working on this kind of more premium offering of coffee that's to be announced, but we want to offer a selection from Chromatic, and we're currently figuring out exactly which one of those coffees are. But it's just like, for us, it's just like, here, we'll start with you, Keynote, you can try that, but there's so much more to offer. Some of the things that excites me is actually the some focuses on coffee education. So even in your offerings very recently, you had a coffee that was processed, washed, natural, and then you had a blend of it. And for us, it'd be really cool to offer a box of coffee that you can just taste the same coffee but processed differently. And I think that's like what's really exciting for me here. But yeah,
and just to like develop a little bit more on that idea, it's like that's what's really exciting for me, because that is how I've learned to be let's say a functional professional in my field. Is you eliminate one variable at a time. So like you said, with the process blend, the single origin blend, like it's cool. It's the Parinema cultivar grown by Rosalio Ventura, and it's Finca Elizabeth in Honduras, in Mercedes Ocotepeque. And yeah, it's cool to have like everything is equal until post-harvest processing. So yeah, you have your wet process, you have your honey process, and typically we do like a red honey or a black honey. I might go into some exploration of like different styles of honey with the same variety. You have the wet process of carbonic maceration, roasted all separately, but it's cool to be able to taste each component separately and be like, this variety from this producer from this region tastes like this. So yeah, I love that. Like it's what we get to do is in a way up to you and what you want from us. Because I would love to do most everything. And some of those experimentals or like different process methods, they do require some interesting adjustments that may be harder to land to experimentally, at least when you have a set amount of coffee that you don't want to completely waste on experimenting.
Yeah, but how about we talk a little bit about these coffees, because we're going to try dropping one of them, but this is the super sneak peek.
All right, so these coffees, so the Elefantes are a really cool variety in the sense of it appears to be a form of a mutation or a coffee that was found on the farm of our producers, Gloria Rodriguez and Luis Rodriguez from El Salvador. They've been doing this stuff for years, and it's really cool to be able to have a variety that is like exclusively on your farm, because that is where it was found, and it is in a way your variety. So they have several of these, let's call them genetic mutations. So far they have the Elefante Mamut, which is, they kind of kept with the theme, like mammoth.
Yeah.
And Mamut is an even bigger bean, different mutation. They have another one called Homado, which is really, really lovely, and we were able to debut that a few years ago. But for the Elefantes, it's pretty much like a red Bourbon mutation. It does have some Ethiopian genetics, it seems. I haven't checked on the status of their latest genetic testings. But yeah, it's a slightly bigger bean. The fruit itself has a ton more juice. So if like you pick it off the tree, and usually you get like 3-4 drops out of a berry, like this one can get you like 14, 15. So it's a considerable amount. So it is fun to process as a honey or a natural, even though it also is like beautifully floral, delicate, some good stone fruit in its wet process form. And we have both. We have the wash and we have the natural. We have those two methods, so you get to taste that comparison. And I think overall, it's another exemplary coffee of El Salvador and terroir, with some added elements of complexity and nuance that I think make it really approachable. But it's also a little more like, in a way, it's a more elegant cup. It's not as rough and tough as some other like more terroir focused varieties can be. I'm gonna try it now.
Oh yeah. There's one thing that's like very present in a lot of chromatic roasts, which is what we can talk about, which is texture and the perceivability of like tactility on your tongue whenever you drink chromatic coffee. I think that's for us very different among a lot of our other roasters that we're offering. Is like when you drink a chromatic cup, there's like just a considerable amount of mouthfeel and texture. It's very interesting, actually.
Yeah. So I love that you bring that up because, when my roast style has changed over time. And it hasn't been to make my coffee partially has been to make my coffee more palatable to a greater group of people as Chromatic has grown and it has more reach. I'm a older third waver. We were talking about this. Like we didn't like I come from an era where we didn't have specialized equipment necessarily for what we were doing. We had to be inventive and like modify and adjust and adapt. So that got really deeply ingrained in Chromatic like aesthetic and like business practice. Like that's why we're very DIY. Just as like we had the skill and ability and desire. So we started working towards things like that. But texture has always been important to me because I think we lack language in English to properly communicate texture. And I think it's more universal as far as like perception for a great majority of people. And we have leaned more towards a lot of our coffees being medium light. We don't want to taste roast character, but we do want to have a direct effect on how we caramelize the sugar and how we develop mouthfeel and body. And don't get me wrong, like I'm going to go back to roasting much lighter, but with that focus and emphasis on mouthfeel, because I think when I was younger, I focused so much on acidity and interest that and a lot of people were just like, kind of shocked by coffees like that. And it's partially because I think some of those, when you're really into it, like you're fascinated by the flavors, especially like at first as you start discovering how awesome coffee really is. You're like, I didn't know it could be like that. And I think sometimes we overlook those qualities of mouthfeel. They're easy to look over, probably because of like how else we eat. We look over certain kind of fats and certain kind of sugars and how they leave a coating. Like I never liked that coating, so I was like, can we do something so it's actually pleasant? Avoiding astringency, like trying to understand, like, is this a pleasant bitterness? Like, is this drying in an astringent way, or is this like pleasant? Is it like leaving my mouth feeling clean, or do I feel like I have to eat a mint afterwards? So I think mouthfeel is just, it doesn't have to be dense or heavy. It just has to be like clean, and I like it when it shifts.
Yes.
So like the higher, some of those fancier coffees, like maybe it'll be syrupy the first sip, and then it'll get juicy, and then it'll end up being creamy or velvety. And like I love those dynamic, layered, shifting, complex. So I'm looking for that a lot more.
Yeah. So that right there is a lot of what interests us in working with Chromatic here, is that this is just a different approach to a lot of the coffees that we're offering. And I think it's really fun. Like I honestly think like trying a bunch of different coffees from our selection and then trying Chromatic coffee, you will 100% notice very different experience when it comes to texture and mouthfeel. I think that's what's really fun with at least what we can offer on here and the coffees we can offer. But yeah, like actually, let's look at some questions. Yeah, I'm like curious to see if anyone has said anything.
By the way, this is the natural elefante, right? The dry process elefante. Like berries on the nose, more cooked berries, like compote, something that you'd find in a pie, like a mixed berry pie. Sweet, mouthfeel, a little creamy. It's a little fuzzy, like fuzzy velvet. And we can probably like
dial that
in and like in the recipe and just
Yeah.
experiment with a few things.
Okay, someone asked me what is my favorite chromatic coffee, like me. So since personally, and also even for this company, is like we're Bay Area based. So I actually started a lot of my personal coffee journey drinking chromatic. I'm a little younger, but
A lot younger.
A lot younger, maybe. But I distinctively remember buying a bag of Gamut espresso, and that was one of the very first times, like in my early coffee espresso journey of tasting the flavor notes on the bag. I distinctively remember butterscotch. Like it was like a mind-blowing experience. So that to me was like my first favorite like chromatic coffee. I was like, wow, am I doing it right? Or maybe it's the coffee, or it was like the first time of trying higher end coffees, and that, like I have a special place in my heart for Gamut. Although that's an espresso based coffee, like it would work on this, like 100%.
Yeah.
But,
So
like,
I've actually been working on. It's already developed. We just haven't brought it to market. Maybe we can talk about it with this. I won't give you the name of it either, but it is Gamut, but it's the filter roast components instead of. And we do. Language-wise, we say like filter or espresso. We know we're informed. Like we know what we're talking about. It's just shorthand. Give us a break. But what I'm trying to say is, we do like to optimize roasts. As in, there are certain things where we're selecting to mute. There are certain things we're selecting to highlight. And for espresso, again, mouthfeel, sweetness, we want 1 to 3 identifiable notes. Butterscotch is a big one. It is very hard to maintain a roast profile for 10 years with varying components and to still hit those marks. Like, it's really hard to maintain. It's easy to take in single origins and roast them and be like, this is how they are best presented, and share that. And we're looking for the differences, but with Gamut, people want the same thing.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a little like too smooth, in my opinion, as a
filter.
filter. But it is like, it's a solid medium roast. It's very good. Medium, like erring on the side of, it's just medium.
Yeah. But
So I do want to make like a light version, which will be a lot more intricate, and it does. We have done it. It tastes great. It transfers perfectly to batch brew, filter, pour over, like gravity-based systems of like this. But it's delightful, and right now, like, we've been pretty consistent with it. It's a Brazil base. A Latin American coffee as a mid-range component, being a Colombian, and then that delicious Papua New Guinea Kunjun I was talking about as the high note. Because it actually, when it cups on the table, most people confuse it for a Kenyan or an Ethiopian. And that's one of the things I forgot to mention. I love Ethiopian coffees and I love Kenyan coffees. I like African coffees a lot, as like near and dear to my heart. If I go to another coffee shop, like that's pretty much the safe route for me. It's like, let me get that Kenyan, or let me get, and hopefully it doesn't taste like tomatoes. But even if it does, I'm kind of like, okay, well, let's see, like, let's focus on the acidity, because I like that phosphoric snap and bite that it has.
yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. We'll probably wrap up real soon. Okay, someone's asking me about freshness. So we're kind of optimizing packaging right now. Just like letting you know, is we've been optimizing like some custom packaging specifically for this. So as you see here, this is an actual chromatic pod. So this itself is not sealed. This isn't sealed. There's actually air in that can be in here, which is actually works out for degassing. But all of this gets sealed. So it's kind of like a bigger coffee bag with a one-way valve, and you can push the air out. You can stick it in a. You can actually stick that in a vacuum canister. You can even stick it in a dark cabinet or something like that. But it's basically like a big coffee bag. That's what we're working with right now. But yeah, that is something that is continuously getting optimized. We are kind of curious about, after we launch everything, what is the reaction to freshness here. There are some coffees that we have on here where roasters have said, hey, like, don't even touch this for like 2-3 weeks. And I think for a fair bit of customers, it might be the first time that they've experienced coffee that it's like, you actually do want to let it rest, and you shouldn't actually be drinking it when it's the freshest possible.
Yeah, I'm glad that this is a bigger part of the conversation. I think there's a lot of, you kind of have to understand your history in a way, like your coffee history, and understand what the issues were with like second wave, to understand why the customer mentality that was kind of handed down to us like has been focused and of course, like, there was a response from third wave to be like, you can't have old coffee, so it's like an overcorrection in a very American way. So you're like selling people coffee right out of the roaster, and that is our business model. Like, we are roast to order. Like, we are fulfilling things. Like, if you are getting a coffee that was roasted not to order because of like how we batch size or something like that, it was roasted the day before. So the turnaround is quick, and we kind of put the responsibility of aging onto the customer, because a lot of people don't want to buy coffee that's 2 weeks old.
Right.
Even though if it's gamut, like, and you buy it at 2 weeks, you can go home and start pulling shots of that immediately. You don't have to wait. So that's something that's really interesting to me, is brewing continuously on this equipment on one type of coffee like Keynote, and seeing what is changing and how it's brewing over the course of 1-2 months. And at what point is it really like not giving us the results that we want? Like, in reality, really truly, like, when did this stop? So that's going to be a ongoing recipe development thing for us, I hope.
Yeah, like, the one thing that we can do with this is we do know when all the coffee was roasted. We can also just have optimized recipes for different ages of the coffee.
And that's what I'm really stoked about, because we want to be able to like take care of all of that background work for you, and it's good for our testing and development, because that's just more data.
Yeah, so we can just literally like swipe across it might be hard to see here, but we can swipe across a variety of recipes, and that's literally how it works there. So, yeah, like, optimizing everything is a goal, but we are trying to get machines out really, really soon, and that is going to be fun, and we'll probably be hopping on a lot of different like live streams and calls going forward, even with our roasters here, especially local partners to us. We really, really love working with local partners. It makes
It's nice to be in the area.
Yeah, it's nice to be in the area, and these are the partners that are pushing us, like, really constantly pushing us about quality, optimizations, freshness, right, or quality of coffee and quality of machine. So we're really excited to be working with Chromatic, and I want to thank everyone for joining here today. If you have any questions, you can just leave it on the VOD, the saved video of here. But otherwise, I want to thank Iver for joining us today as well.
Hey, thanks for coming over, bud.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Okay, all right, we'll finish up now.
Take care, fellas.